Catholic mysticism and the emerging church. What, you may ask, is mysticism? What is the definition of mysticism? Mysticism is an attempt to directly experience God, bypassing your mind. For those who are Christians and claim to be mystic, it is an attempt to have a direct experience of God, bypassing the mind and bypassing Christ Jesus as mediator. It doesn't take Christ Jesus as mediator into account. So that is a definition of mysticism in general and of so-called Christian mysticism. I say so-called because there's no such thing as mysticism. Nobody has direct contact with God. We only have direct contact with Satan and evil spirits, as is very evident when you study the fruit of false mysticism. Now, the Catholic Church has for centuries incorporated mystical aspects of pagan religions, but it was not upfront in defining that they precisely did affirm and authenticate mysticism and pagan religions. They were not up front. Like when I was a priest in Trinidad for 22 years and I saw the results of voodoo, it was evident to me that this was part of the culture and of our Catholicism. But it wasn't spoken of, and it wasn't formally taught in Catholic seminaries, like when I was in seminary. I had some vivid experiences of voodoo. For example, when I was a priest in South Trinidad in a town called Gasparillo, one young man came to my office and he asked for permission to go to a voodoo meeting. We called it Shango in Trinidad. It's the same old stuff, but a different name. In Cuba, they call it Santeria. In Brazil, Santeria. Sometimes the more gross word in Spanish, brujeria, which really means witchcraft, which it really turns out to be contact with evil spirits. But brujeria, Santeria, Shango, or Trinidad name for it, or voodoo in other nations, is the same thing. It was an attempt to contact God directly, and it had lethal effects. I told this young man, no, do not go to the meeting. But I got the address of where it was. And I turned up to the meeting from just beside the road, watching in to see what was happening. People gathered, my Catholic parishioners for the most part, and they went into a house through the door and into the backyard where I could see clearly. There was a big bowl. Now I knew from what I'd been told before that this bowl was goat's blood, and they dipped their hands in the goat's blood and made the sign of the cross, like Catholics do coming into Mass. So that was the beginning of the Shango voodoo feast. And then they assembled in the backyard, as people mostly did in Trinidad because it's tropics. And 6 young men came out as people sat in the circle, and they began beating the bongo drums. This was calling down the spirits. And then the pitch reached higher and higher, and people got into a frenzy, and some men and women got up and started dancing, and then some of them started to reel on the ground like they were snakes and yelling and shouting. It was frightening to see. The darkness was coming down, but they had lit lanterns in the backyard, and I could still see. It was frightening to watch. It was the following day that the mother of that young man came to me and said that he had been taken to the mental asylum in Port of Spain, St. Anne's. And I went to see him twice. He was totally out of his mind. That was just one of the evil fruits from that particular meeting. An attempt to reach God, and with evil fruit. But that was typical of what we find in Catholic cultures, particularly in the developing world, like Trinidad and Haiti and all of those islands, and in South America, the Philippines, and on in the African countries. Frightening. But the Catholic Church officially recognized pagan religions and authenticated them in 1965 at Vatican Council II. And this is where Catholicism made a complete turnaround. People said that the Catholic Church changed. Yes, not in their sacraments or their ritualism or the Pope being the chief man and the infallible authority, so-called infallible authority, but they officially recognized paganism. That's where they changed, at Vatican Council II. I want to read exactly, word for word, from one of the most famous documents from Vatican Council II. It's a Latin name, Nostre Aetate, paragraph or section number 2, quotation. In Hinduism, men explored the divine mystery and express it in both the limitless riches of myth and accurately defined insights of philosophy. They seek release from the present trials by ascetical practices, profound meditation, and recourse to God.